Hi. So we're going to talk about configuring the LT Auditor Syslog Server. And as I showed you in the earlier video, you can click on the LT Auditor Syslog config application to bring up this particular window. As mentioned earlier, we have two tabs, the Settings tabs and the Rules tabs. The Settings tab is where we configure the Syslog server to receive information, log that. And the Rules tab is where we would set up specific rules for information received from any of the devices that are sending us information, and create rules that can then get piped into LT Auditor for real-time alerting and reporting. So we're going to be talking about the rules, setting up rules in another video. In this video, we're going to talk about how we can configure LT Auditor to receive syslog messages from syslog-enabled devices in your environment. This particular window is broken into different sections, so I'll discuss each section as we move along. The first section is the connection section, as you can see here. This connection section defines how you're going to receive messages, either through the UDP protocol, which defaults to port 514, or you could switch it to the TCP protocol, which defaults to port 1468. You could easily change these port numbers to any port number that you want to receive this information on. Just make sure that each of your syslog enabled devices needs to send information to that same port, depending on how you choose UDP or TCP. The next section is the processor settings. Processor settings defines how many processes or threads are launched in the syslog server to receive messages. The default is 3 threads and receiving around 1,000 events per thread. The system is built in so that you'll never lose any information. This is just a threshold. So if you need more threads, you can increase that number, particularly very heavy loads. We recommend increasing that load. One way to check that is to check how much CPU is being utilized by the syslog server process. If you find very high CPUs, we would recommend increasing the thread count. We have an unused button here, use asynchronous process. This has not been implemented, but we'll do that at a later point in time. The next section is on messages. So this defines what happens to the message once we receive it. The message offset defines how much, where do we want to start logging the message from. So you might receive a message that might have a lot of characters at the start, a message that's prefixed with some characters that you really don't need. And so if you put a number in here, it'll start recording messages from that offset. The target event log defines what event log is going to log messages received. You could put any name you want. It defaults to LTL log, and these two, target event source and log, indicate. We recommend putting the same name, just defines how the message is going to get logged into the event log. You also have an exclude edit box here, exclude logging. And this would be primarily used to exclude messages that you don't need to see. That's very important because syslog messages can be very noisy, and there may be a lot of redundant information that comes across that you can exclude. So you can put in characters into this box, delimited with a pipe sign, to exclude all these different messages that you don't want to see logged. And it's pretty useful. Otherwise, you're dealing with a lot of messages that are very, very noisy. The next window here talks about how these messages get logged. The default is it logs messages with a specific event ID. This is just an arbitrary number put there, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the event ID that's going to be used to log every message that it receives. You can choose whatever number you want, and that's the event ID that's going to get stored in this particular log, the LTL log. You have the choice to customize event IDs based on the type of information coming in. So for example, if I were to choose this, log messages with custom event IDs, I could just define a particular message and say, if I have a message that says SSHD 1, I want that event ID to be 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on and so forth. So if it fits this particular pattern, then whatever patterns are defined in this table, then the LTR Syslog server is going to log that event in LTL log with the particular event ID described in this table. I'm going to switch it back to log all messages, in which case we're not looking for any rules, we're just logging everything coming in. Further below, you're going to see a checkbox that says use rules to log messages to the new event log. Now this section is needed for the rules table. If this is not checked, then no rules are going to be applied. So it's very important that we select the syslog auditing event log here for interaction with the LT Auditor infrastructure. LT Auditor has built-in mechanisms to read syslog auditing, the syslog auditing event log. And so it's important that we configure rules to syslog auditing, and that's how you're going to get real-time alerting and reporting with LT Auditor. This checkbox log message to target event log, if that is not checked and you have the rules log turned on, then the LTR Syslog server does not log information into LTL log. In other words, if I have this unchecked, then nothing gets logged to the LTL log message. But if you want to see it in both places, you could check that. And it's always good to have the raw information coming into LTL log and the process going into syslog. And once you have your system working, if you don't really need the LTL log message, we recommend unchecking that. Debug messages are information that are stored about the number of messages processed, how many threads are running. It's just useful information to just keep an eye on how the processor, the syslog, our LTR syslog server is functioning. And you get messages in the application, the Windows application log, that detail out certain stats on messages received and what each thread is, how much each thread is processing in the system. Anytime you make a change, you can just click on the Save button, and those changes are applied automatically. And with that, we complete the section on configuring the settings. Please watch our video on setting up rules next to show you how we can set up complex rules to report and alert in LT Auditor. Thank you.